Have you ever actually seen the clouds part and heavenly rays shine down?
In some movies,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I've seen the
I th-
clouds kind of part.
yeah, yeah. I've seen the heavenly rays.
Yeah.
The God rays, as they call them.
Yeah.
It's majestic. I see why people reference that as like an awe-inspiring moment.
Hmm.
And sometimes, even though it's a cliche about having a great idea, sometimes that is what it feels like.
Yes. Yes.
And and when those moments happen, and I'm not saying that I'm an expert on this stuff, but it feels like you aren't doing it. It's sort of doing you. You know what I mean?
Yes.
As it were.
Yes. Yes.
That unexpectedly got a little bit more adult than I intended. But anyway, so that's what I'm going to talk about today on part 2 of Inspiration.
Oh.
A moment where it felt like something came completely into shape all at once.
Yeah, so the idea that the clouds part and the and you get this great moment of guidance. Yeah, especially because I live down south where there's a lot of sun and it's very warm, so there's a lot of clouds parting.
A lot of opportunities, man.
Yes, but that sounds like a cool topic for today's discussion.
Well, you've had moments like those. You know what I mean.
I do. Yes, definitely.
Excellent. I'm very curious to see what you're going to tell us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, let's get to it.
You got it.
Welcome to the Heart of the Cards, a conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what we're dealt.
Hey, this is Dan Green.
And Eric Stuart.
And this is episode 31, part 2 of Inspiration. And we're having fun talking about the many ways that happens and what you do with it. So, Eric, last time I led off with a story. Let's switch it up this week. Why don't you lead off?
Yeah, wow. Okay, so thinking of a time when the clouds parted, the sun came out and gave me...
The muses sang to you, the angels, the choir of angels was singing.
Yeah, I in terms of my creative endeavors, there's times where it's not even what I guess you would consider the arts from what I do, but there's definitely times that I am inspired to even do my little DIY stuff. Like
like your pergola.
Yeah. So the other day
This totally counts.
Right? Okay. Yeah.
In my opinion. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be about
So
art.
I have definitely been known as someone who collects a lot of stuff. Sometimes that's junk, sometimes that's cool stuff. I think it's all cool stuff. And I don't like to waste. I don't like if I'm doing a project and I'm talking like a DIY project and I've got scraps of wood that might still be usable for something. I put them in the garage and say, well, maybe, instead of just throwing them all out, right? I know a lot of people will be like, well, I don't have another project plan, so I'm not going to need these again, right? But I don't. But I don't like to do that for many reasons,
Right.
but both environmental and also, there's so many times I go, oh, if I only had a 2x4 that was 3 feet long, so I can do this thing. So the other day, I was looking at sort of the finished dining room area that I had been working on in my house for a while.
It's very handsomely done.
Thank you. As one does, you want to sit
Sure,
back
you
and
gotta
just
check out your place.
just taking a look around and like, okay, do I want to do something different? Is something missing from this? What would be the
Literally, you're the one who has to live with it.
Exactly. So I'm looking and I'm thinking to myself, because I had just played a show where the venue made custom bottles of wine with the artists' faces on the label to sell at the show.
Okay.
And I had a
Okay.
couple of these bottles, which I thought looked really cool. And I'm like, well, where I keep my wine in this area, you can't really see the couple of cool bottles I might want to display. They're tucked away somewhere else. I was like, what could I do to display some wine? And of course, the first thing you do is you start looking online to try to oh, I should get a wine rack. I should do this. And I said, no. I'm sure I have stuff around. I'm going to build something. So I looked in the garage and I had a whole bunch of white boards from some shelving project I had done. And I mean, we're talking all different sizes, whatever. And I'm laying them out on the floor in different things. I'm like making like my own version of Jenga, right? Like,
are they the same make and just at different sizes? Or are
some
these, like,
of them
for
are,
different
some of them
sets?
they're
Okay.
all different. Like
Okay.
maybe there's like 12 of these boards. Some are like they're all pretty much the same thickness, but some are different widths, some are different lengths.
Sure, gotcha.
And some of them are, but they're all sort of painted white. And I'm like, okay, all right, there's a starting point. And I'm laying them out on the floor and trying to figure out what do I have that are two of a kind that could be sides to something, and I'm trying to figure out the best thing that I could build with these pieces without having to go to the store and buy more and then continue the cycle of having too many like scraps left over, right?
Yeah, right.
So I put this thing together and I'm like, okay, I've got this little wine cabinet I'm going to build. And I'm going to make a little door on the top with nice miter cuts that open up. And I'm like, oh, but you know what? The vibe of my dining room is got this sort of both like rustic, eclectic, weird stuff going on. It can't just be this white wine cabinet hanging on the wall. It needs to have some like distress to it. And then I remembered I had kept some of the crackle paint I used on a hat rack I made, right? So I grabbed the remaining crackle paint and I bring that out. And I'm like, I'm going to make this thing look like an old country wine cabinet. So I build this thing. I use the crackle paint. I make a door on the top. And the only thing I had to order was the chicken wire framing for inside the door, which I think was $5, and put that in there, and put it on the wall. And if I can describe it so that people can visualize it, it's like a medicine cabinet. The top half is the swinging door, which you can see through the mesh, and down below are two chambers, vertical chambers that hold two wine bottles on either side. So I was able to put the special, Eric Stuart, the mugshot wine bottle next to the Snoop Dogg version. I have one of his bottles of wine next to me, because I thought that was appropriate.
I always pair you guys together.
Don't you?
That's funny.
I know. We're gonna have to do a project together, and it looks great. And I think the two sides of this accomplishment that really meant something to me was I looked at a pile of wood and I saw the vision of what I could make. And it's really like a nice piece of furniture. And the other side of it is like, there are days where that is so therapeutic. Like it is. Oh God! It is just so. I don't like to do electric work in the house. I don't like to do plumbing. Those are the things that are in the walls that nobody can see unless you made a mistake, right? The house is on fire or there's a leak. Then you know that somebody was doing that work. But doing these kinds of things, whether it's building a small piece of furniture or doing my flooring or something like that, you really can sit back and say, "Wow, like I made that thing, that tangible thing. It's right there." So that was a moment of inspiration from what could have been someone else's trash pile.
Yeah. I mean, that's you literally created something that nobody else would have seen.
Yeah. And that was fun. It was very fun.
Yeah. And it's functional, and I'm sure it came out beautifully.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. No, I'm digging it. Yes.
Can you send me a picture of you and Snoop Dogg?
In wine format, yes.
In wine format, yes. Well, also, we were talking last episode about the importance of limitations, and I think having only 2 bottles of wine available to you is probably a wise way to approach your drinking with friends for the evening. Okay, well, that was fun. That was fun, and you're very handy.
Oh,
generally
thank you.
Speaking,
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm not at all surprised to hear that you could throw something like that together.
Yeah, my stepfather had a shop in our house growing up. My dad also, he had, I was allowed to have access.
He knew his way around a table saw?
Yeah, and I was allowed to like do that stuff as a kid. That was definitely
Right.
something that I enjoyed. Yeah, as a little side note, it was even interesting. This weekend, I was working on another sort of project like that, and a neighbor's young son who I think could use a little bit more time with parents. He's a really good kid, but he seems to have to sort of figure out stuff on his own, which, you want to just take him under your wing and go like, hey, come hang out, with us for a minute. But then, that's
Sure.
not necessarily, always allowed. But he saw what I was
Okay.
building. And he said, "Did you build that thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did." And he said, "Wow, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen somebody build themselves." And I was like, "Oh, well, thank you so much." And then and he was kind of watching me do this stuff. And he's probably, I don't know, he's probably like maybe he's 9, and I really wanted to say, "Hey, you want to come over and like help me measure and do this?" But I didn't want to get in trouble because I know his
Sure.
parents, but I'm not his dad. But
Sure.
it made me realize that I definitely, even with all the challenges of the dynamic of my dad with me and also with my stepfather. Of course, now we're very, very close. But that dynamic, one of the wonderful things I did get out of both of those guys was that I was allowed to do that stuff and to build things. And, I would love to pass that on to somebody. My daughters both know how to use like a drill and a handsaw and stuff like that because I taught them when they were little. I don't know how much they do now, but that was really nice to be able to have that access.
Sure, absolutely. And that was some of my favorite stuff to do, and like when I was in middle school, as they call it now, or junior high. But the shop class
Yeah.
was always one of my favorite. I love the smell of wood being cut, you know, and yeah, it's obviously very, very useful. Cool. Well, so my version of everything happening all at once
Yeah.
is not so practical. But it was a fun moment creatively. So, speaking of people that we rely on to give us some important feedback, was a subject from last episode, and one of my go-tos is my friend Phil, and we've only been friends for like 20 some years. So, but he used to live in the apartment beneath the one I was in when I was living in Park Slope, and he knew me before Yu-Gi-Oh. And he and I, like, we saw the 9/11 attack, right? And he knew my wife. I knew him before he met the woman that became his wife, and his children come over and visit sometimes. Anyways, he's like family, but he's also a great graphic designer. But at the time, he had been doing a lot of storyboard work. And he was developing scripts. He wanted to like write a movie, and pitch it and that sort of thing. So we were bouncing off story ideas. He happened to get to know a guy, mainly through his graphic art stuff, that was one of the publishers, I think, for Mad Magazine.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and Phil later went on to do a strip that got published not through Mad Magazine, but like he understands that publishing world. And we were trying to come up with ideas that fit our interests, but also might be funny enough for Mad. So and the idea is we'll write the stuff, I would draw it, he would ink it. I forget who's going to color it, but so we were coming up with a premise that had humor in it, but that was also a comic idea, right? Whether it's a comic strip or a few comic pages, that was less clear. So the challenge was to come up with the premise that we were interested enough in and could also be funny. So I remember this conversation happening on an evening, and we're on the phone, and we hadn't really put much thought into the concept yet. And I just had an idea. And so now I'm not saying that this is the most amazing idea in the world. Please don't think that I'm about to tell you something that's going to make you laugh your butt off, because it may not. Right? I'm just talking about how complete the idea was.
Yeah.
From beginning to end.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know why, but a post-apocalyptic future came to mind as a way of being able to make fun of the time that we're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like a hindsight thing. But the premise was that there was this apocalyptic moment, but it was every apocalypse cliche at once.
Oh.
So it was the AI thing. It was the we're hit by a comet thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was
funny.
all these other doomsday scenarios. And we called it the megapocalypse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's what wiped us all out. Then we have this dystopian future. In this future, there are people who have the ability to manipulate the laws of probability. So they can make themselves very lucky in certain situations, right? And one such person is assigned to protect this woman who is the daughter of a rebellion leader, right? Who's trying to fight for the good and shrug off any oppressors that are in that dystopian landscape, right?
Yes.
Okay, and the reason why these people who can manipulate probability are able to do so is because they perpetually are doing something that is statistically so improbable, right? That it allows them to throw laws of probability out of balance. And that one thing is that they don't masturbate.
That's funny.
They are the order of the cyan spheres, or another name for cyan is blue, and another name for spheres is balls, and you can put those two together.
That is actually very funny. Well, and I love the setup because, it was getting so deep into the sci-fi.
Right.
I'm thinking,
Complex.
Where's the Mad magazine?
Where's the humor? The woman he protects is devastatingly attractive sexually.
Oh.
And so that's another reason why he can amp up his probability, skills, is because, man, does it take restraint when you're, perpetually around somebody who is so sexually compelling.
I see.
And her name is Sublima Divinja.
Try saying that 1 time fast.
I know this is a little more adult
Now, wait
than we
a second.
usually get, but yeah.
When did you write this?
This was like a conversation I had 20 years ago-ish.
Yeah. You sort of were ahead of Mike Myers, I have to say.
Oh, I don't know about that. He was pretty
no,
established.
His a lot of vagina is a little bit. Yours is much funnier.
Thank you, I appreciate it. It's
Yes.
much more musical.
Yes.
But really, James Bond started all of that. So
That is true.
so yeah, but it was like it was all just coming out of my mouth at once. I was as I was expressing one idea, the other idea was forming without me feeling like I was thinking about it. So, and there are other elements to that world where there's like a gross mutant kind of race called the T-Vegetables, and basically people who've become some cyborg combination of video game PlayStations and media centers, but those represent that part of our society, that part of us where we do too much of that, and what does that do to us?
Yeah,
essentially turning us into vegetables. Anyway, there were some other things for so there could be a plot. But yeah,
so
but
you wrote this.
Heart, yeah.
So you wrote this. It all just came to you. Did like Phil come back to the apartment or whatever, and you just sort of went blah, and you had the whole idea
No, we were just having a conversation. Actually, we weren't. Yeah, I was out of Park Slope by that point. I was in Williamsburg with Michael, and so it was a little later on in our friendship. But yeah, it was just like, we had decided to make a time to talk about it, and then I was just like, hey, what about? And then it just went from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And of course, now that's something else that Audromeda is going to have to produce.
We gotta do. I wrote the first episode, but yeah.
You never know, right?
Yeah.
The flypaper theory. You throw up enough things, something's got to stick. Like, who knew we were making a show about this? No, that's great. That's great. That's very cool.
Veronica Taylor is sublime. Oh wait, she turned down that role. Oh, but it's a great character. Yeah. So in having that conversation with Phil, he was a witness to that sort of unfolding. And so after I kind of got all that out, right? He was like, "Did you just think that up?" And I was like, "I guess I did." He's like, "It's like this egg. It's like it's all complete."
Yeah.
So
I think when you also
was-
remove, we're talking about the constraints of like having, either got to work around a deadline or a title or a this and a that. You had a concept of what you guys were working on in terms of what your goal was. But
Right.
I think when you can truly just step back, relax, and not sort of put so much pressure on it, there's so many things around us that can trigger great ideas. That it's when you're really sort of like, I need to do this, which is, I don't think that's how we were meant to be creative.
I think that can lead to bad things as well as good.
It's nice to have a goal, like if you're trying to make something or write something. I get that.
Sure.
But sometimes when we're just like, hey, let's go have a picnic
Free
in the
form.
park, and you sit out there and you're like, look at that tree. That the bark on that tree looks like a cool face. Oh my goodness, that's the character that I need to add to that. There's the face right there. It's having trouble coming up with the eyes, and there they are, the knots in the tree right there. That's the you might see something in nature.
Well, and there's also kind of an echo of whatever's stirring around inside of you. You kind of see it in the world around you.
Yeah, it's like when we were walking through buildings and you see backgrounds for crossing the gods.
Right, and I'm thinking that.
And I love that. And it's not even like on the radar at the moment, even though it is.
Right, but it's all because it's never gone.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, but working on a show or doing a play, you're in the mindset of a character and you begin to see, a lot of those truths around you, I suppose.
Yeah.
But so it works the other way too, but yeah. So anyway, well, I hope that those were some fun stories for people.
Yeah.
To hear.
I learned a lot.
I want to have a glass of Eric Stuart wine.
Yes.
While listening to an episode of Max Bingo now.
Well, to be quite honest with you, I think my music is better than my wine. So you probably want to drink Snoop Dogg's wine while listening to the Eric Stewart band.
Okay. Well, he is a man of taste.
There it is. Yes.
Yeah. That's fair enough. Yeah. All right, my friend. Well, thanks again for joining me with this conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks to everyone who's been listening and following to the Heart of the Cards. We really appreciate you checking in with us, and the comments are great. Keep those up. Also, if more of you like, more people will be able to like the show. So we got about only 20% of people who are listening liking. So please like if you find the chance. It helps a lot. And subscribing is great too. We keep on getting new subscribers every week. So spread the word, and we'll have more people to join the community. And without you, we wouldn't have a show. And we're always aware of that. I think on a recent appearance, I said you put the U in Yu-Gi-Oh!
T-shirts available next month.
Exactly. But it's so true that, without people listening and following what we do, we really wouldn't matter that much. So we deeply appreciate your attention. And we look forward to the next time that we can have a conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what we're dealt.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of the Cards with Dan Green and Eric Stewart. We hope this conversation in some way spoke to you. Whatever your journey, we look forward to crossing paths again in the next episode. This is Veronica Taylor, and on behalf of Andromeda Productions, we wish you well.
Audromeda, always a sound choice.